Okay, thank you everybody. Just moving along swiftly, I'd now like to introduce Richard Stokes, who's the Director for Research Commercialisation and leads the academic industry linkages at Dublin City University.
Thank you, Dennis. About a year and a half ago, IRDG organised a very provocative conference, and it was about innovation. And at that conference, they said that 98% of all innovations fail. That was quite a remarkable finding, and we started wondering about it. Myself and a colleague, Paddy O'Boyle, who'd worked in the States in many industries and also in Bell Labs, started digging deeper to see, was it really true? And it seems on the face of it that it's true, that 98% of innovations fail. And a prestigious institution like the Harvard Business School weighs in and says much the same thing. They say that somewhere between 70 and 90% fail. And the question is, what can we as a nation do about that? Can we contribute in any way? I think we can. We can either give up and just start publishing blue sky academic papers, or ask, how do we do things differently? Now, the previous speaker raised some very provocative issues, many of which I agree with, incidentally. There is an obsession in this country with metrics. There's an obsession with short-term outcomes without looking at the wider significance of what we're all doing. But there is hope. Ultimately, I think, particularly if you look at the American data, many of the innovations fail because it's about money. And it should be about money. It takes money to do the research. Without getting a lot of funding, you can't do meaningful research. And if you don't translate that research into innovations that make money, many promising ideas will go by the wayside. And that's just the way of the world. That's life. It's tough, but that's the way it is. But that doesn't mean that many of those innovations, which are canned because they just don't bring up enough revenues, can't be ultimately transformed into opportunities and businesses that may not make the billion-dollar mark, which is what's behind many of these American statistics, but they can make a significant difference to our economy. Rory spoke about the claims that Ireland is number one, according to some metrics. We're not quite number one, but we're very close to the top. The EU Commission did a study on the effectiveness of knowledge transfer and commercialisation using a composite set of metrics which look at the problem from a multidimensional point of view. They don't just look at licenses, they don't just look at spin-outs, they look at the entire process. And you can see from that Ireland's doing extremely well. We're number two, and I think that's a tribute to the unified thinking that applies in this country. The state agencies, the Department of Enterprise, Jobs and Innovation, Science Foundation Ireland and the universities agree on one thing, that it's about impact in this economy. It isn't about making money. And I think this is one of the reasons that we're, on the face of it, apparently more productive than many European universities. Unfortunately, there is a phenomenon, and the previous president of our university, Dr. Ferdinand von Prądzinski, said to me, Richard, that's simply because the Europeans are so bloody awful at it. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but we have to ask ourselves the question, and we certainly can't rest on our laurels by thinking that we're doing extremely well. Ireland's number 3 in license agreements. It's doing extremely well in terms of license agreements per 1,000 research staff. So compared to where we were, we are in a pretty good place, but it's by no means good enough because it's an extremely difficult world. The innovations that flow from these research activities still fail, and we've got to try and make a difference and ensure that they don't fail. In terms of startups, this one really bothers me. Ireland appears to be number 3. In 2014, there were 29 or 30 startups from the fourth level system in Ireland. That doesn't sound like a large number when you consider that overall there are about 100 high potential startup companies a year formed in this country. And yet when you look at the fact, and Rory is an expert on MIT because he's written a book with one of their academics, MIT with 1.2 billion of research expenditure between the main campuses and the Lincoln labs only generates between 20 and 25 spin-outs a year. Yet Little Ireland generates 30. So what's going on? Are we much more prolific? Are we much more enterprising? I doubt it somehow. I think we're chasing metrics. And I think it's a very dangerous sign because it's one thing to spin those companies out. They're languishing. They can't raise money. The VCs won't back them. The VCs are looking to de-risk these opportunities. We've got a crisis, an enormous crisis, despite what people tell you. The incentives simply don't exist for investors to invest in high-risk opportunities. If you compare the opportunities in Ireland, you compare the investment climate, it's much more favourable to invest in a startup in the UK. You get exemptions from capital gains tax as a founder up to 10 million. You get to recover your losses in investments in the next round of investments. It's just overall a better climate. And it's time for innovation and policy formulation in this country. I think it's a great credit to the agencies concerned with science and innovation and technology in this country that they've managed to bring coherence into the activities of so many institutions, so many universities. But I think the policymakers concerned with tax and incentives failed to get the message. This is a crisis. Our startups are not getting money, and it's because starting a company is extremely risky. Going back to the notion that 98% of innovations fail, probably 80% of all startup companies fail to generate the return on investment that the original backers wanted to see when they backed the idea in the first place. So we've got to do something about it. We've got, on the face of it, a very interesting seed capital scheme which allows people who start companies to claim back their income tax over the last 6 years. Now that's a pretty good incentive. The catch is that you've got to have money to invest. And can you take any young postdoc, or even a postdoc who's well established under the age of 40, has he got any money to invest? He's been crucified on income tax, universal social charge, and all sorts of other levies. They haven't got a cent. So you can't borrow the money in the first place to enable you to claw back the income tax relief that theoretically exists. It's time that the state actually looked in a much more innovative way at the environment and did something about it. I know it's been a tough time for everybody, it's been a tough time for the state, but if we don't begin to develop and support our homegrown entrepreneurs, ultimately the multinational companies are extremely welcome here, with whom we all do a great deal of business, will someday move their operations elsewhere, because there will be better incentives, there will be better opportunities to do business. And we've got ultimately to have our own homegrown base of multinational companies. If that takes 20 years, if that takes 50 years, let's start. I'm going to skip this slide. What this slide tells us is a slightly different picture. We're not doing as well in research agreements with industry as many other countries in Europe. And I think this is part of the problem. There's been a lot of money spent by the state in funding collaborative research. Science Foundation Ireland has done a wonderful job in bringing us from nothing in terms of serious research with impact in 2003 to where we are today. But there still is not enough engagement with industry compared to the rest of Europe. And although Europe may not be doing as many license agreements, it may not be doing as many startups, it is doing something right, which is leading to innovative knowledge transfer in a non-traditional way to companies through contract research, through consultancy, and many other mechanisms. And I think the tech transfer system and the university system in Ireland, which I am a part of, has to recognise this. If you compare the US and the EU, Rory spoke about the different worlds in the States. Clearly, it's a much more financially sophisticated environment in the States. There's much more money available for spin-outs. You can raise 50 million for a good idea for a startup in the States. You'd be hard-pressed to get $1 million here. And you'd have to put your house on the line and everything else you own as well. On the face of it, though, the EU does appear to compare very favourably with the States. But when it comes to license income, the States does so much better. But when you drill down into that, if you isolate out those few blockbuster drugs that make billions, then they don't, on the whole, do any better than European universities or Irish universities. So we're doing a lot right. We've come on a journey in Ireland since 2003, and I think we should be proud of what's been achieved. But if you look at Irish industry, you can see from this slide that the rate at which innovations are introduced is pretty average. It's less than the EU average. We're not doing as well at innovating in our small companies, and I think that's what our job is, to work with small companies. And indeed larger companies who can make a difference in employment terms. But I think there is a crisis in innovation in small to medium-sized enterprises that are Irish-owned. They're not generating enough sales from new products. I just skipped a slide here, I'm not sure. So what are we going to do about it? In DCU, we have a complete commitment to enterprise and innovation, starting with our president, and it infuses every decision that's made throughout the university. And we have a number of initiatives that are designed to support entrepreneurship and innovation. We have Invent, which is the Technology Transfer and Incubator Centre, which I lead as part of my commercialisation responsibilities. We also have a newly opened innovation campus in Glasnevin, which was the old Enterprise Ireland campus. And that is designed to encourage collaboration. We're not concerned with intellectual property as a driving influence there. We're concerned with collaboration and getting people to work with us. We have the DCU Ryan Academy, which is designed to facilitate entrepreneurship, whatever the source of the idea, whether it comes from the wider community or the university. And we have the DCU Business School, which has been pioneering new methods of marketing, the Marketing Lab, and has driven significant change throughout the business school and throughout other faculties in the university, where more than 2,000 modules have been redesigned to redefine what it is students from the 21st century should learn about business and their relevance to the world of business and enterprise. Wrong slide. So in Invent, how do we operate in DCU? We believe we're market facing. When I was asked to build a technology transfer in the technology transfer office in 2007, it had one employee at the time, Emma O'Neill, who's sitting here, and we've now built it to a team of 11 people. And I was determined from day one that we would have predominantly people with business experience. That's worked well for us. We're market facing, we're pro-business, we're easy to deal with, and we're quick to deal with. And I think the evidence in that is that over the last 6 years, cumulatively, DCU has done more licenses than any Irish university. But that is metrics chasing. That does not tell you about impact, which other speakers spoke about. And ultimately, that is where the real ultimate test will be. Are we making an impact? Are we making a difference? But we've got to start somewhere, and we start by being easy to deal with, friendly. Rory spoke about easy access IP. We have our own flavour of that called License Express, which is a short form, 2-page, non-negotiable license. You can take a wide range of technologies from us, and within 24 hours, in theory, you could do a license if you wanted. What we found in practice, though, is that it still takes many months to do licenses because companies want to do, and rightly so, the due diligence behind the technologies. And they don't just sign license agreements without fully understanding the people behind them, the technology behind them. So my response to easy access is that, you know, it is a mechanism. It should be one of many. It should be one of many mechanisms used by universities to engage, particularly with those early stage technologies for which it isn't clear where there's a home. But my somewhat cynical and sceptical remark would be that easy access IP was introduced by the University of Glasgow, who were abysmal failures at commercializing anything. Moving on then. I'm not going to give you a lecture on the technology platforms at DCU. We cover a wide range of disciplines. We're members of most of the leading research centres funded by Science Foundation Ireland. We lead the Biomedical Diagnostics Institute. We're significant partners in Insight, Adapt, and many others. There's a wide range of capability and technology at DCU. There's an orientation at DCU towards translational research. We believe that innovation starts with a problem statement, and most of our research programs are informed by a real challenge. I take the point that Rory made. If we focus too much on short-term research and short-term innovation, it may well be that in the long term, things don't work out for this country, and there has to be a balance. But that's a subject for a conference in its own right, for another day about research prioritization and where the country is going. We have a job to do. We're trying to do it as well as we can, and so far we've been quite successful at that. The percentage of the Irish adult population who express entrepreneurial inclinations is extremely high, and that is what's behind many of the initiatives that we have in DCU to provide support programs and incentives to people to start companies. Mentoring and advice is a significant element of much of that, and in Invent we have an incubation centre. We provide office space, laboratory space, and a supportive environment of mentors who provide on a pro bono basis professional services and advice on how to avoid the many pitfalls that have been encountered by people who've gone before them before you on the journey. So from the point of view of locating close to the university, in the heart of the university, the Invent Centre exists, but since we're almost permanently full, we've opened the Innovation Campus in Glasnevin, and the Innovation Campus is there. It's an environment where we want companies to come and form clusters. It has a bias towards clean energy, sustainability, and the software technologies that enable that to be diffused throughout industry. But we're open for business. We welcome anybody who wants to come and talk with us. And just going back to the previous slide, the mentoring program that we developed for our own researchers in DCU was called Tech Venture. We developed that in association with our own DCU Ryan Academy. And it's been quite a successful program to the extent that it's now rolled out by Science Foundation Ireland throughout the country. And those researchers who avail of TIDA grants to commercialise their technologies or to bring early stage technologies to the next stage are able to avail of that program. And that's part of our commitment to ensuring that science and technology throughout the country is commercialised, whether or not it comes from DCU. So, in conclusion, DCU wants to bring about an environment where there's a like-minded cluster, a cluster of like-minded companies who want to innovate. Hopefully they'll engage with us, hopefully they'll license technologies from us, but we're open for business, we want to do business, and we're very easy to deal with. So, in conclusion, that's the DCU experience. Our mantra is collaborate to innovate. Come and talk to us. We're at stand number 12 over here, and my colleagues from the Tech Transfer Office are here to license anything you want with quick and easy 2-page licenses. Thank you.